Utah had a booming weekend and landed several big players in the transfer portal. What kind of an impact will they make on the Utah football team in 2025? We're breaking it all down on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, as I mentioned. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has you covered. They are your place to be, and you can start the season with a big return with FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, you can visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Yes, I was a former intern and not some coming off from a tractor farm, as me and Alex will talk about what I currently look like right now. But kind enough to be joined by Alex Napoles, the KSL Sports host of the Saturday Show. And Alex, I mean, we got to talk about all these commitments, dude. There's no offseason in college football. There really is. And I'm like, maybe we'll talk about this. Who knows? You don't ever know when stuff's going to happen. When is Utah going to land a bunch of guys? Well, this weekend, they landed a ton of additions in the transfer portal. So we got to talk about all those guys, some of the new coaching hires that Utah made too. Alex, I want to give you the chance first, man. Which player do you want to start with that excites you most that Utah added?
Well, I think we got to start with the one that came today in wide receiver Creed Whittemore, who is coming out of Mississippi State, and he's probably the one out of all the commitments so far, obviously not counting Devin Dampier, that I'm probably most excited to see.
Yeah, he's a guy at 15 receptions for 167 yards and 2 touchdowns and has some SEC experience, right? So was going against some really good corners in practice. And he's another guy that excites me because, look, the Utah wide receiver room obviously got decimated with it's not even injuries. It was just, you're losing Brant Keithy. You're going to lose Dorian Singer. You're now going to also lose Money Parks is moving on. I believe he was a senior as well. It's honestly hard to keep track in the COVID era at this point. So, but this is a guy, Whitmore, who's going to have an opportunity to step in and earn some time. And I think the biggest thing that excites me, Alex, is Utah landed a receiver in the transfer portal because based on what they put on the field, and I know this is Jason Beck's offense, you got Devin Dampier, there's some new excitement in Salt Lake, but doesn't change the fact that the Utah football program passing attack the last 2 years outside of the number one receiver in Devon Vele and then this year Dorian Singer, it's been abysmal. And their history with transfer receivers isn't great either outside of the number one guy. So the fact that Utah was just able to land a transfer receiver excites me.
Exactly. And I think, you kind of hit it a little bit, but Dorian Singer and Brant Keithy were probably the two top targets for Utah this past season. And so with them moving on from the program and, having to kind of rebuild a wide receiver room, you're kind of looking at a guy like Williams and a guy like Zipper to step up, but you still want experience. You still want someone with a little bit more time playing at the college level, someone who just has that experience. And so Utah needs to pick up some good wide receivers in the transfer portal. And I think they potentially have one now in Whittemore, in Creed Whittemore, committing to Utah.
Yeah, it's definitely the hope. Redshirted this past season too, so had just 4 catches for 65 yards, and then the 11 receptions for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns back in 23. And as you said too, young receiver room, and Whitmore, even though he was a high recruit coming out of high school, this is a guy who was a 4-star talent back from Gainesville, Florida. And Florida, one of the best states for high school football, so that excites me as well. But Utah's not done. There's a lot more work to do in this receiver room. You still got to find and land that true number one guy. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. They didn't land Singer until January, right?
I think so. I think that was a little bit of a later commit.
Yeah. So you can still get really good players down the line in Utah.
Exactly.
So that's the one. I think Whitmore it was such a need. I think that's where that one gets me really excited. Another guy I want to hit on and talk about is the fact that Utah did just get a legacy commit in Jackson Jones, his dad having played at Utah. This is a guy who was a 3-star recruit when he committed to Oregon. He was the 34th ranked edge defender in his class and committed to the Ducks. And look, didn't play, but he had an opportunity to learn, grow, and develop for one of the premier programs in college football. If you're telling me you couldn't get on the field for the best team in the country and that you have that potential and upside still, and now you want to come play for Utah, that excites me. I think Utah has some other good defensive ends in the room still. Paul Fitzgerald, John Henry Daly are the ones we didn't get to see a ton of from the portal a year ago, and Logan Fano, obviously the premier guy that Utah is getting back. So I see a lot of upside in Jones. I like the intangibles that he comes with, 6'3", 230, still has eligibility, obviously, too. And I think this is a guy who we'll see how much he does this fall. I mean, it is a guy who went back in high school in 22, finished with 87 tackles, 17 sacks, 3 fumbles recovered, also blocked 2 kicks too. So he had some production at the high school level. Now didn't get to play at Oregon, but has potential. And that's all you can ask for in the portal. So I think this is a good get too. And I'm excited to see if he can produce on the edge.
Look, there's a lot of things about the portal that I don't like, but there's a lot of things about the portal that I do like. And I think in the case of Jones, it's one of the examples of what I do like, right? You commit to Oregon, and Oregon's already a crowded program as it is. It's full of 5-star talent, the best of the best. And so there's room for competition. And sometimes, with the transfer portal, some guys want an opportunity to have better playing time, want an opportunity to go out and have an opportunity to compete for the number 1 spot rather than staying at a program and developing, right? It's kind of a double-edged sword, but I think in the case of Jones, you look at the D end room for Utah, you had a couple of transfers out on the D line. You have Van Fillinger and you have Connor O'Toole, who were seniors, are no longer going to be a part of the program. So there's going to be competition. There's going to be potential to fight for that starting spot. And so I think Jones coming in just gives you better depth, and it's good to see a guy who was recruited by Oregon and kind of learned alongside some 5-star talent to come into Utah and now have that ability to fight for that number 1 spot.
Now, I did mention the legacy commit, but I do want to mention his dad was Daniel Jones, who played wide receiver at Utah from 97 to 98. So that's where back when he played there. And once again, this is a guy who it's got potential. I did not think that, and there's some places I'd see as I scroll through just the info that do also call him a linebacker. It feels like he will be more of an edge guy, but either way, I think that's where we'll end up seeing Jones at. And it's another defensive end with potential. Who's going to be the other starter outside of Logan Fano next year? I don't know. I think John Henry Daly, Paul Fitzgerald, maybe it could be Johnson. I still remember a couple of years ago, Samote Peppa is now in the portal, but I thought it would be Samote Peppa and Junior Tafuna as the starting D tackles. Then Keanu Tanavasa burst onto the scene and burst into our hearts shortly after too. And he's thankfully coming back for another year, obviously a fan favorite for what he does on the interior. That's what I think Johnson has the potential to be too. So excited to see what he can bring excited what Jones can bring to the defensive end room. There's so many names. There's so many portal guys. It's a lot to keep track of. We're trying to keep it all straight here on Locked On Utes. And we're just getting started talking about the portal moves. We're talking about the guys Utah added, but we also just got to talk about the state of the transfer portal because the University of Texas just stole our punter, basically. So we can talk about that too. And we'll dive into all of the craziness that is the transfer portal and in some ways how it's benefiting Utah in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. This is at FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, Monday Night Football is here. I'm excited. My Vikings are hosting the Bears tonight. They're going to be wearing these all winter white unis. Would encourage you guys to check it out. But obviously, I'm feeling the Vikes big in this one. I think that they're just a better team right now. I think the Bears are teetering and they need to get a new head coach in there. Not going to be Bill Belichick, though, as we all know. As for the other Monday night game later, Falcons taking on the Raiders. The Raiders are also just not in a great spot. I expect the Falcons to finally bounce back. I know they didn't look great the previous weekend, but I would roll with Atlanta in that one too. But however you guys are feeling about those games, and of course we have the college football playoff games coming up this weekend as well as all the other sports. Make sure you guys head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Alrighty, Alex, keeping it moving, talking about the transfer portal. There is a lot of guys that Utah added, but another one I'm excited about, they added an impact, a veteran in Jeremiah Caldwell, who's a transfer from the community college levels to Utah. And look, community college transfer, I understand why some people be like, can he make the transition? But the truth is he was incredibly productive. He had 26 tackles, solo tackles, I should say, 32 tackles overall, and also had 6 interceptions. Also, you want to know another transfer portal guy that had success from the community college level? Jake Retzloff, BYU's QB, came from the community college ranks, transferred up, had a lot of success with the Cougars. They still finished 10-2, and I think Caldwell's a guy who can contribute. Losing CJ Blocker recently for Utah was a tough blow, but I think this is a guy who I'm excited to see how he can contribute. Morgan Scalley always knows what he's looking for here. So Jeremiah Caldwell, The Rock, as his Twitter bio has his little nickname in there too. Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw, when they find a DB and trust him, that's good enough for me. So I think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's something you and I have talked about in the past, JT, is the fact that this staff has had such an ability of identifying talent. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, even though he is coming up from the community college ranks and the JUCO ranks, it doesn't necessarily worry me. What is a little bit worrisome is the fact that he committed to Louisville, then transferred to Miami, Ohio, and then went to community college. So this is going to be his 4th school, and that's something, again, one of the things you don't necessarily like about the transfer portal, but you welcome him with open arms. He's going to join the team, and I do believe that Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw can potentially harvest that talent that this Caldwell has to hopefully make an impact on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and sometimes guys who start at that high level, they have to fail. They have to go through things. They take some more time too. It's the learning curve. It's not the right opportunity. And obviously the meetings went well with Caldwell, or else Sharif Shaw wouldn't be bringing him in. So I'm excited. I think this could be a guy I think he has a chance to be a starter, right? It's going to be tough to beat out a fully healthy Kenan Johnson if he gets back there. The Georgia Tech transfer, I believe, is still coming back as of right now. Elijah Davis started this last season. I thought he did a lot of good things. Obviously, no Cameron Calhoun, unfortunately, but Smith Snowden still coming back at this moment, too. So I like the Utah cornerbacks they have, but nice veteran depth piece in Caldwell. We'll see what he can do moving forward. Utah added a new punter, but before we get into why they added a new punter, let's talk about the reason they had to in the first place. Jack Bomeister transferred to Texas. I actually forgot. Bomeister walked, so I remember thinking like, okay, he's just out of eligibility. He had a grad year left, but rather than stay at Utah, he went to Texas. How do I feel about this? I totally understand. It was more, there's a good chance it was NIL related. I do not know that. I just look, when you're going from Utah to Texas, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Texas has more NIL money than Utah. Or hey, even if it's just like, hey, Texas is better right now. Like, that's an undisputed fact that Texas is a better program than Utah football at the moment. So not mad at Jack or harboring any ill will there. It just is kind of, that's the crazy thing that we see a school like Texas is like, oh, we have a need next year. We need a punter. Like, let's get Utah. It's like, that's what college football is becoming. The Norvell coach at Colorado State talked about this last week. And that's where it's unfortunate to me that is the way the sport is trending, where it's just the top programs can pick who they want and everyone else kind of has to fend for themselves.
Again, one of the things you don't like about the transfer portal, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Jay Norvell summed it up perfectly, right? If you haven't heard or watched the video of Jay Norvell, highly recommend it because it's so insightful of what's truly going on behind the scenes. Right, you have guys who weren't even in the transfer portal, weren't even thinking about leaving their team, but then somebody comes calling and saying, hey, I can probably get you this much in NIL money if you go over to this school. So they end up jumping in the transfer portal. And it just seems very unregulated. There's not very many rules of what you can and can't do. And I think in the end, if college football doesn't want to just become a sport where you're basically selling guys to the highest bidder, there's got to be some rules. There's got to be some regulation going into this, because you're just going to see situations where guys have incredible seasons and then somebody says, hey, I can get you X amount of NIL if you head over to Georgia, and then Georgia's going to pick off the best of the best.
Unfortunately, there's not those rules. But because there's not those rules, Utah was able to do the same thing. And I'll say this one seems more like a transfer of just like, hey, wanting an opportunity and now going to get it at Utah. Orrin Phillips comes over to Utah. This is a punter who actually is another guy from Australia too. So he's coming on over. He was Missouri. He was at Missouri, and now he's coming to Salt Lake City. He used to be at Murray State. When he was there, he averaged 43 yards per punt. He had 40 punts, landing inside the 20, had 8 or more, went for 50 yards, and his longest was 71 yards. Those stats coming to us from our friend Joe Coles at the Deseret News there. But this is the portal, right? You lose one guy, you got to go find someone else, and glad Utah was able to do that. I like Phillips' resume. I think he's got a chance to be a good punter for the team.
Yeah, and Utah has always had a great track record with those Australian punters. Right, Wishnowski, who's kicking it up in the league right now. You have Bomeister, who I thought was pretty well, even though he's no longer with the Utah program. And so, again, just high hopes for this guy coming in. And yes, again, one of the good things you do like about the transfer portal is the fact that, you lost a punter. We need to replace our punter. We don't really have the necessary depth to be able to replace this guy. So let's go out into the transfer portal, find a guy who can come in and fill in that hole. And I think you get that with Phillips.
Mm-hmm. You do get that in Phillips. So those are the recent transfer additions for Utah. This team is not done, though. As for what I feel like they still need to add in the portal, the big one is probably a starting running back, although obviously Utah, very exciting who they're going to have coming up to campus this week for a visit here very soon. So excited to see who Utah is going to continue to add into their backfield, because I do think that's a big thing that Utah needs to continue to build on. Surprising to see Luke Wysong, who was that receiver at New Mexico last year, actually went to Arizona. I thought Utah was going to end up landing him, so was a little bit surprised there. But the Washington State back, I got tangled up in my notes. Wayshawn Parker was fantastic at Washington State a year ago, and his running back coach, who we'll talk about in a moment now at Utah, he's scheduled a visit for Utah. Utah battling with some former Pac-12, now Big Ten teams, UCLA and USC form too. So that's another position. Running back, add another wide receiver one. Trying to think where else I'd like to see Utah go. If Lander Barton stays, you're fine at linebacker. Another defensive end, maybe. I don't know, though. But yeah, biggest thing is running back and wide receiver for me, and a veteran backup. You need to find another backup quarterback. Alex, is there anything else you look at and you're like, hey, and obviously there'll be a lot more moves in the portal, but what else do you go? Utah needs this in the portal.
As we stand right now in kind of where things are shaking up, you definitely obviously need to rebuild that quarterback room. You can't rely on just Devin Dampier. We've seen in the last 2 years that you just can't rely on one guy, because if that one guy goes down, you don't have a backup plan. You end up in the situation where you were this past season. So you do need to rebuild that quarterback room. I would absolutely. I think that running backs are a big need right now. You lose Mekhi Bernard. You still got Mike Mitchell, but again, you got to rebuild that running back room. Basically what you said, JT, with the wide receivers as well. A lot of help is needed on the offensive side of the ball right now, I think, for Utah.
Mm-hmm. It is. And Jason Beck's done a good job getting Dampier. Was a huge thing. Alex, what was your reaction when Utah did land Dampier? I've been asking everyone that on the show, because I know I was fired up, man.
It's a big pickup, and I'm excited to see what he can do at the P4 level. Mm-hmm. I thought he did a phenomenal job being a dual threat guy with New Mexico. Probably could do a little bit better in the passing game. At 12-12, I think we mentioned it too, JT, the last time we spoke. Is not the best ratio, but I think with 2 years left of eligibility, I think that Devin Dampier still has a lot of room to grow. Super, super excited to see him commit to Utah. And again, potentially be the number one guy next season. Dual threat, I think, will help out Utah a lot. And I think kind of just watching him a little bit has a lot of Tyler Huntley characteristics. So it makes me excited to see what he can bring.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. And there's still so much to talk about with the portal. I do want to talk more about in a future episode of Locked On Utes. Wayshawn Parker. We'll talk about him on tomorrow's show. Talk about the other transfers. Oh, excuse me. Almost lost my voice. Talk about some of the other players that Utah's lost recently. And one crazy stat that we didn't get much time to dive into on today's show. Utah is the 8th most players amongst Power 4 teams to enter the portal. 18. Kind of interesting. So talk about what that means on a later show, but I think we still haven't hit on the coaching hires, which are massive. Utah added a wide receiver and a new running back coach. So we are going to talk about those additions that Utah made to their staff in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by the College Football Playoff on TNT. That's right. It's that time of year again. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever. Bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup the South Methodist University Mustangs, which I still is so weird when you write their name out and just don't say SMU, battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate on TNT, True TV, TBS, and you can stream it too on Max. That's right. The college football playoffs are on TNT. Okay, that was one of my favorite ad reads I've ever done. I'm very fired up for this 12-team format and very much so appreciate the great folks in TNT for sponsoring Locked On too. And obviously, who doesn't love Inside the NBA? I know this is college football, and we obviously love college football, but when you hear TNT and sports, you're still going to think Inside. So make sure you guys check out the games on TNT. And as for we wind this one out, look, Utah obviously not in action this weekend, but they're making the steps to try and get back to being a team that vies for the college football playoff. And if you're going to do that, you have to vie for the Big 12. And what Utah did to try and compete for that is they added new coaches. They hired Micah Simon and Mark Atui from Washington State. And then Simon comes over from New Mexico, where Jason Beck was at. First thing, just Quinton Gathers as well as Alvis Whitted. I both thought they did really good things, but this is part of college football. You see turnover, so respect to what both of them have been able to build. But now talking about what Utah added here. First, I think you start with Atui. I mean, just with what Wyson was able to do as a true freshman a year ago, just helping identify talent for a guy who had 735 rushing yards, averaged 5.4 yards per carry, and was earned a spot as a Pac-12 like top performer, obviously one of the best freshmen in the country. Like that's what Atui has an eye for recruiting. I'm incredibly excited to see what kind of backs he can bring to Salt Lake City. And obviously, Alex, that starts with hopefully him landing Parker.
Yeah, I think Wyshawn Parker is similar to the conversation we have with Devin Dampier, except a lot more potential in, he was a true freshman last season, and he already showed glimpses of how good he can be. If Parker is able to join this Utah side under his former coach in Atsuaya and start building the running back room with him, I think there's a lot of we hit it just a little bit ago, but there is a lot of room for this running back room to grow, especially now that you lose Bernard and there's a lot of questions to who's going to be your number one. And so now with a new head coach coming in with a new running back coach to come in and kind of have the ability to build that running back room as you want it to be, and to hopefully line up obviously with Jason Beck and the style of play that he wants to play. I think there's a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room for growth in this running back room if Atsuaya can pick up some good recruits.
You know, you mentioned new head coach. I also thought we were going to be talking about that being Morgan Scala this offseason, but we're going to be waiting on that one. And as I talked about earlier on my show Friday, I'm excited that Whit is back. And new coaches, though, and new coaches continuing with this trend. Micah Simon comes over, as we mentioned, just coming over from New Mexico. But like Wysong, who I mentioned, unfortunately went to Arizona, was hoping Utah could land him. He was an all Mountain West performer and finished in the top 10 in the conference in receiving yards per game and receptions per game, and also ranked 19th in the FBS in those categories. That comes to us from the Utah Athletics website there. So added some quality playmakers, was a coach. Here's where it can start with end with your evaluation of should I be excited for Simon or not? Was on the staff that averaged the fourth most points amongst FBS teams in college football. I think I can get behind that pretty easily. So excited to see the guys he can bring in. And the fact that he's already starting out with what Whitted did a great job bringing in Zipper, as well as bringing in Zacharias Williams. So you have those guys there already. I think Tayshawn Lyons is still with the team as well. I thought I was curious if he was going to transfer just because he wasn't used a ton this year. Those three receivers are already there. And you get a guy with an eye for developing talent, as he did at New Mexico. This seems like a really good hire to me too, Alex.
It does seem like a good hire. It seems like, even though he's still in his earlier parts of his career, and he's still on, a little bit on the younger side, I still think that he brings a lot of value to the team, because he can connect with those players. He can develop the talent, right? Wysong, I think, was probably one of the better receivers in the transfer portal. And a lot of his development goes credit to Simon. So if we can just continue to bring that now with the University of Utah program, I think the receiver room will be in good hands.
Mm-hmm. And it will be in good hands. Incredibly excited about the future of Utah football. But to close out today's show, I really do just want to extend all my hearts, thoughts, prayers, and condolences to Cletus Woodbury's family. Cletus was someone who tragically passed away this weekend he was someone that was so kind to me during my time at the University of Utah and was the definition of what it meant to be a Utah man. Even the Utah Athletics website had it posted perfectly. Utah man forever. He got me tickets to some events. I will never forget, like, he helped me get to the Rose Bowl back in 21, and he barely even knew me. Like, that was just the type of guy he was. Went out of his way for everyone, was always there to help me out, get tickets or anything like that. For someone he didn't even really know, to show that level of kindness was always so cool, and was always great running into Cletus. So that really broke my heart when I saw the news this weekend. So thoughts and prayers to his family, and everyone at Utah was better for having known him as well. So just wanted to give him extend those thoughts and condolences to his family as we close out today's show. But Alex, always appreciate you coming by and coming on. If people want to listen and check out more of what you got going on, because you are incredibly busy, my friend, and as I told you earlier, I appreciate you so much, sir. You do a fantastic job. Tell everyone where they can check out your stuff at.
Absolutely. If you want to deep dive into anything Utah sports, and follow me, you can find me on both social medias, Instagram and Twitter, or X, at Napoles Alex. Follow me there. And then, of course, you can check out all of our other content at KSL Sports.
I know Alex Smith is the GOAT for Utah football, but you can be the GOAT, Alex, for Utah podcasting.
Oh man, that's a heavy title, but I think I can do it.
Either I want to say I love Alex. He was on the show last week too. That's no shot at any Alex's too. I love Alex was kind enough to come on, and there was a lot of craziness. So I appreciate Alex always staying on. You're the man, Alex. Thanks again.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for the invite. As always fun to talk Utah football.
Appreciate all of you for tuning in. It is always fun talking Utah football, Alex, and I'll be right back here doing it again tomorrow. The portal craziness, the coaching hires, all of it will be covered here on Locked On Utes. We hope you'll join us then.